This is a story about rights. What rights did the freedmen or former slaves have after the Civil War? The most basic level of right they had was freedom, the end of slavery. And a lot of Americans thought that that was it, that slavery was over. But did that mean the right to vote? Did that mean full equality? Did that mean citizenship? They weren't willing to say that. Um, White Southerners, of course, were against this. They had fought a war to prevent this from happening. Uh, Democrats in the North had come to the point where they were willing to accept the end of slavery for the most part, but they certainly weren't willing to extend rights beyond that. Now, the way this pyramid is set up is that those who believe in greater rights up higher on the pyramid also believe in everything below it. Obviously, the right to vote, for example, is built on the end of slavery. So all of these, the higher levels build on the lower levels. Now, one level above simply legal freedom, what was called civil rights, but it was as defined in the 19th century, not as the term was used in the 20th century. We'll explain that in a couple of minutes. Um, this was a position that moderate Republicans took. The Republican Party generally agreed that the freedmen should have civil rights. Now, the so-called radical Republicans also believed in political rights, such as the right to vote. But only a few of the most radical Republicans also believed in social rights. This is more or less what we would call civil rights today. Now, let's go into each of these terms and understand exactly what they mean. What you need to know for now is how this pyramid is organized and have a very firm grasp of these concepts and who supported them. Now, civil rights, as it was defined in the era of Reconstruction, meant things like this: the right to sue and testify in court, even if you were testifying against whites, the right to own property, the right to be free of work restrictions. For example, the black codes, those laws passed by southern states after the end of the Civil War, often said that you had to do only farming, that you didn't have the full range of opportunities that other citizens, other people had. Uh, of course, under slavery, you could not sue or testify in court if you were an African American. If you were a slave, but only also if you were a free black, you couldn't testify in court against whites. That was often true in the North as well. There were all sorts of laws that often prevented you from owning property. Uh, so uh, these were significant improvements, but nowhere near full equality. Now, political rights meant first and foremost the right to vote and the right to hold office. Um, and many African American men, not women, but men, did vote, and quite a few did hold office in the South during the period of Reconstruction. It meant, in general, the right to be citizens. Now, social rights was the highest level, and that is what we would call civil rights in the mid 20th century. It meant things like equal access to businesses, the right to stay in a hotel of your choosing, to dine in a restaurant of your choosing, um, the right to intermarry, that black and white people could marry each other without any legal restrictions at all. The right not to be discriminated against because of race. In other words, this looks like real equality. But that was the most extreme position that most American politicians, even in the North, did not believe in at that time. Now, in order to secure rights for the freedmen, Congress passed and the states ratified three constitutional amendments. They are the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and collectively they are often referred to as the Reconstruction Amendments because they were enacted during the period of Reconstruction. The 13th Amendment simply ended slavery. It was that simple. And if you remember from the film Lincoln, this was the big issue that the House of Representatives faced at the beginning of 1865, and an issue for which Abraham Lincoln worked very hard. The 14th Amendment, which was ratified 3 years later in 1868, provided citizenship. It said anyone born in the United States was a citizen of the United States and entitled to the due process of law and the equal protection of the laws. Now, what that means we'll discuss in class. You have been given a handout on containing the text of the Reconstruction Amendments. It's posted on Moodle, and you need to read it carefully and jot down any questions you might have about that language, and that's something we'll deal with in class. Finally, the 15th Amendment, ratified in 1870, provided voting rights for males without regard to race or previous condition of servitude. In other words, if you're a former slave, you had the right to vote if you were male. Women would not get the right to vote nationally for another 50 years, not until 1920. Now, as a result of the rights that were established under congressional Reconstruction, a number of African American members of Congress were elected, and a good number were elected to lower offices in the South. Unfortunately, African Americans lost the right to vote in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. That is a very important story, but one for another day beyond the scope of this presentation.